And I'm super excited to be talking with Daniel Wallace, a writing teacher and editor-in-chief for Burlesque Press, an accomplished fiction writing expert, amongst a whole bunch of other things. His online course, Plotting and Planning Your Novel, has helped hundreds of talented writers revise their novels. Daniel is also the host of the annual Escape the Plot Forest, which we will probably get into, which debuted on HeySummit in the past few months. Daniel, thanks so much for taking a few minutes to speak with me.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
So can you tell us a little bit about you and your background? You know, we'll get into the summits later, but yeah, what do you do?
So I help aspiring and experienced writers, primarily fiction writers, write better novels, start the novel they've always wanted to write, finish or revise the book that they've been struggling with. I did a graduate degree some years ago in fiction writing, MFA, and I just felt like there's got to be a better way of teaching people to do this. There's got to be something, and there was a kind of one approach is like we all sit around a table and we just give you comments on what you wrote, as if there's no rules of any kind. It's just like, you wrote this, let's talk about it. And then there are a bunch of books that seem to me to be saying, here are the 5 things you must always do in every single story. And I was kind of like, there's got to be something in the middle. And I spent a lot of time in my PhD researching that, but I was just so, I had real imposter syndrome. Like, who is I to teach anything? Why should no one listen to me? You know, they could go out and, you know, buy Neil Gaiman's course or masterclass. And it's a long story of how I managed to go through those fears. But then I started building an email list, which is my first big decision, and then creating online courses. And that's sort of how I got my business started. And it's been great ever since. I mean, I've worked with some wonderful people all around the world. It's just a pleasure.
Awesome. So how does that then, that email, so kind of a newsletter list or email list, growing into courses, how did that then grow into thinking about using summits as part of that stack?
That's a great question. So I actually have a very sort of cute story about that, or you know, real. You know, there was a real sort of moment of epiphany. I had heard about HeySummit years before, but again, even though I was doing successful courses and classes, I felt like, who am I to run a summit? I still felt nervous. But I did have this problem, which was when you run a course business and you have your email list going and you're doing webinars, it can get into a point where you are kind of treading water. Like it's a lot of effort to work with the people who have bought your courses and classes. You want to do a really good job for them. And you also want to keep the people who haven't bought yet. There's like thousands of them on my email list. You want to keep sort of talking to them and promoting things of ways to promote to them. And it can start to feel like there's no time to grow the business, to fundamentally grow the business. You know, you're doing a little bit here and there. And I was starting to feel really getting kind of tired, like just sort of this fatigue. I'm sure everyone who's tried to do something like this knows the feeling of just like you're doing the same things over and over again. And I had in the past done a little bit of affiliate style webinars where we would join an audience together, or they would bring their audience to me, I would pitch, and that had worked kind of well. And then one day I attended a webinar by Brian Harris, or formerly of Video Fruit, now Growth Tools. And I just think Brian Harris, if people don't know who he is, he's very, very smart. And he said, like, you know, what you need to do is get your stuff in front of other people's audiences as quickly as possible. That's his like, you know, golden recipe. And he had this kind of, there was clearly the webinar was pitching this idea of like every week you pitch to some new group. And I thought, wait a second, I should just do what he's describing, but use a summit and do the whole thing in 1 week. So rather than taking months to pitch, sort of introduce myself to a whole bunch of different people's audience, I should do a summit. And then in one, you know, 4-day event, I will get to know a huge number of other people. And that was my logic. That's how it fit in. And it worked. It's worked incredibly well.
Awesome. That's an interesting journey that you took in terms of like thinking about it from a content marketing perspective rather than from like, I want to run an event perspective. So the Escape the Plot Forest, that was the first one. So can you just tell us a bit about like what did that entail? Like, why was it Escape the Plot and not like the Authors Summit 2020 or something like that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I try to, first of all, I'm aware that there's a lot of other writing teachers out there, and there are a lot of other events out there, and you know, and the people who that are the most active in my audience go to a lot of these different events, and they do different courses. And it's sometimes a little shocking, even when like they will just casually say, "Oh, I bought this other guy's course," and I'm like really nervous. But then I realize they think of that as totally normal. Like they bought my course and they bought this other person's course. It's not a, you know, they don't see it as like betraying me or anything like that. So what I wanted to do was add something to the market that would be unique, that would really fill a need, and that also that would be my specialty. My specialty when I help people is plotting in a particular way, or plotting with a certain spin on it that I think is really effective. And I also knew that I could create a really powerful educational experience for people. What I didn't want, and what I personally, this is just me personally, but what I don't like in summits is where it feels like it's sort of the video of the hour. And, you know, the sort of the deal being offered to me as the audience is spend a huge amount of time watching just different videos. And no, you know, like for me personally, I didn't want to provide that kind of educational experience. I wanted something that was structured and sequenced and built people up day by day, and then it
Like
made
a good
sense.
book.
Sorry?
Like a good book.
Yeah, like a good book or a good course or a good,
Yeah.
like that had like an arc, had a development to it. And so I knew that if I did like, you know, the Authors Summit, that would be impossible because there's just too much to cover. With plot, and then later with my next summit with style, it was possible to really design something that worked pretty well. And audience feedback said that was really popular. I had people telling me saying things like, you know, we've never seen an event like this in the space, and that it all made sense. It built up in a really powerful way.
It's interesting the way that you again frame that, because we often talk a lot about do you go big or do you go niche? And I think that oftentimes people assume that if I'm going niche, I'm limiting my audience. Whereas what you're really doing is you're just providing more value, more specific targeted value to probably the same audience. And people are willing to maybe pay for 5 different summits or 5 different events if you're really digging down and solving a specific need that they know that they want, rather than embracing the broadness of it, you know?
Yeah. I also think that it made it easier. I mean, this is also my first time organizing an event like this and pitching it to speakers. And it was a little easier, I think, pitching it to people, because you could say, this is an event all about plot. This is how it's going to work. And like, it was a relatively easy pitch to make. And I think if I had done, you know, this is going to be our event about writing, it would have been harder.
Yeah. Or there would have been higher expectation from the sponsors that like, okay, well, so how many tens of thousands of attendees are you going to get? So your next one was Style and Voice, similar type of format, but just a different subject matter, or did you change it up in terms of the format?
It's basically, I mean, it was in every major way, it was the same idea. I really liked the way the plot summit went down. And so I wanted to take another fascination of mine, which is writing style, and use that as the basis for another event. Now, I knew that writing style would be more niche, in this case, writing style is a niche in that for many fiction writers, it's something that people see as like a luxury, like a thing that you get to after you solve your plotting problems. And so I knew that it would be smaller, and I pitched it to the speakers in that sort of cautious way. But it was a wonderful experience. And, I think that if you design a great learning experience for the audience and, the marketing plan goes fairly well. I mean, we still had about 1,700 attendees, and the rate of people going from the free to the paid pass was very high.
Mm.
You still can provide a really great experience and does really good things for, it still works. It's still really good.
Cool. And so specifically thinking about HeySummit, what do you find most valuable about it as a platform, as a tool, or a way of maybe allowing you to design the event that you want?
Well, there's two things I wanted to say, and the first is that the thing that's really noticeable about using HeySummit is that people will say, I can't believe this is just your site. Like, it looks really professional from, the front page. People who are in this kind of business, or people who are just like writing teachers in general, are just, there's something about the way that you all have created the site and the platform, so that even on first glance, instant glance, people are like, this seems like a really big thing and a really big deal. And that's really good. It's really good. The thing that I personally really enjoy about HeySummit during events is the way that it's easy to create a combination of live and pre-recorded events that for the audience feels seamless. Mm. Now, I find this almost a little too confusing, and at times it creates problems, because people will be in what to me seem obviously pre-recorded sessions, and they'll be asking, is this live? Is it? And they'll be trying to ask questions of the speaker. But that's just a testament to how seamless it feels like when people are in the experience, rather than, you can imagine an event which is, say, like a bunch of Zoom links, and people are just like clicking bit by bit. HeySummit creates this really cohesive, like, experience of being there that I think is really pretty fantastic.
Awesome. Great to hear. So what's up next?
That's a great question. I want to do, I really like this model of focusing on a particular writing skill or challenge. And I have, and I'm interested in building up some, what teachers call like asynchronous ways of being part of the experience. I'm talking to the guys over at the Voice tool, their platform. There's some really interesting ideas about that. I'm interested in just like more topics, like something about revision. Like when I was in the Style Summit, whenever people were talking about editing their own work, there was just this rush of energy from the audience. And I thought, well, that would be interesting. I also want to experiment with something that's more like a class than a summit. Like summits with their paid and the free tier create this particular kind of vibe, and I want to see what it would be like to do something fairly big, but that's paid up front, and see what the vibe, the experience is like then, both for the speakers and for the audience. And then finally, I have a friend over in Italy, Brian Berni, who taught me a lot about like just summit business practices when I was getting started. He's brilliant. And we've talked for a while about doing a kind of craft and marketing summit, because something that I hate and I don't want to do is teach things that I'm not an expert in. Yeah. I don't want to pick out speakers, even if it's not even me doing the teaching. I want to be teaching stuff that I know how to teach. And there are lots of aspects of book marketing that I am not an expert on. And so working with someone else to do that, I think is the future.
You're monetizing your network as well as your expertise. So
trying my best.
Trying your best. Great. Well, thank you so much, Daniel, for taking a few minutes just to talk to me about your fantastic events. And folks, you can find out more about Daniel and his work at danieldavidwallace.com. You can find him on Instagram at Writing Daniel, and on Twitter at on Pine Street. Thanks again, Daniel.
Thank you.